We've complained a lot this week about the Iowa offense, about Kirk Ferentz. Now it's time to find some solutions. We'll welcome in David Eickholt to break down what it's going to take for Iowa to turn around this season.
You are Locked On Hawkeyes, your daily podcast on the Iowa Hawkeyes. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
I'm Trent Condon, and this is the Locked On Hawkeyes podcast. Thanks for making Locked On Hawkeyes your first listen every day. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new customers can bet just $5, and if your bet wins, you'll get $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. Download the app today. I've been covering the Hawkeyes for over 20 years on the radio here in the great state of Iowa, including currently on the Iowa Sports Radio Network. You can hear me each weekday from noon to 2, along with Ken Miller, talking the world of sports and a lot of Hawkeye talk over there with stations in Des Moines, Sioux City, the Quad Cities, Cedar Rapids, and Iowa City again each weekday from noon to 2. It's time to find some solutions. It's time to break down what it's going to take to get things turned around. And we go to the source of Hawkeye information we love to have on the show. He is David Eickholt as he joins us here today. And I welcome in David Eickholt from 24/7 Sports. HawkeyeInsider.com is where you can find all the great work of David, along with Elliot Clough and also Sean Bach over there, keeping everybody informed on everything going on in the world of Hawkeye athletics, a lot of recruiting as well. David, good to see you once again. How are things?
I mean, things are going well, man. Off to a fast start this season, kind of starting to trend a little bit more into basketball territory as things are going to start to heat back up there over the next few weeks. I believe Media Day is in a little over a month, and it'll be nice to have people excited about football and basketball, like almost on equal playing field.
Different feel, and certainly going into last season with Iowa basketball, and maybe a little later we'll get into that. But let's start at the top of the fold. And it is, of course, Iowa. The passing game woes continue. The disappointing loss to Iowa State. We're working today to look to find us some solutions, and we'll get into that here a little bit more. But the conversation has been centered around Mark Gronowski. And I know you are a supporter of Gronowski, that you believe that there's more to the issues here than just the easiest thing, right? Pointing at the quarterback and putting it all on the QB.
I think he's probably the fourth issue right now, if I had to put a number on it, right? Wide receiver is the number one. I think the route running is inexcusable. And honestly, I thought Kirk Ferentz's press conference on Tuesday was as critical as he's been about the passing game, because I think he expected it to be farther along. I know we've spent the last few months talking about the wide receivers, what I've heard behind the scenes, well, my colleagues have, what Kirk Ferentz has been saying. And from everything I'm aware of, man, I think Kirk's pissed about it. I think the wide receiver coach is pissed about it. I think that they feel like they should be farther along because they're showing some things in practice that you would think would translate over to a game. It's one of those things where, when Ben McCollum was hired, just to change it back to Iowa basketball for a quick second to reference this, the big question was he likes to impose his will on teams and kind of suffocate them like the art of war. It's exactly what the Iowa wide receivers need to do. I think they're getting beat up at the line of scrimmage. I think they're letting their routes be dictated by what coverage is playing. I think they're taking shortcuts to get to their end spot where they're supposed to be. And I don't think it's working. I don't think they're running their routes completely. The drops were a major issue on Saturday. I think they were only counted 2 official ones, but there were at least 4, if not 5, by my standard of what a drop is, right? Ortworth had one. Jacob Gill, who was as steady as they came last year, had a pair of them. And I think Seth Anderson had one as well. I mean, we're talking about Gronowski's completion percentage, man, going up to low 60s at that point. But you also can't pin all this on Gronowski from this standpoint. One, Trent, let me ask you this. I know I'm bouncing around here.
Yeah.
How much blame do you put on Gronowski for the interception on Saturday?
Oh, very little. Now, even if that Weechin doesn't slip, that ball is deflected away, and there were 2 defenders there. That was maybe my more concerning part.
Yes.
Not only do you have the cornerback that was cutting in, and Cooper got the interception on that play, but there was also a guy right behind him as well. I mean, he threw into blanketed coverage, and even if Weechin doesn't fall, that's a bad read.
It's a bad read. I only give them about 20% because I think it just falls incomplete. I think Weegen at least can test enough on the ball, barring an outstanding play from Iowa State. And remember, that was the touchdown drive, right? That's the one they gave up. So I don't really put too much blame on Gronowski from that standpoint. I thought it was Tim Lester's worst called game.
Yes, again against Iowa State, just like last year.
I thought the game plan made no sense whatsoever. They failed to extend the defense. All the routes there's only 2 or 3 different reads. They're only going about 7 to 8 yards. If you watch their safeties, they're not playing more than 10 yards back. And then they go up once they see them break off into their out routes, or they're not running a post route. The only time they ever played deep, and when Iowa ran that slow mesh offense, Gronowski even said he was looking for the deep post route, but the safeties did drop back on that. But if you saw that back angle, Trent, when they ran that slow mesh, did you see the linebackers' faces when Iowa went into that?
Yeah.
They had no idea what the hell was going on.
Mm-hmm.
And it made no sense from that standpoint as to why Iowa just didn't go back to it. Even if they ran the same play, they weren't going to be able to recognize it. And even if they do recognize it, there's about 4 different options Iowa could do on that play. He can hand off to Jazz Patterson. Gronowski could take off by himself. He could look for the deep post route, or he could look for the tight end over the middle, right? Like, there's a wide variety of things there. I think the wide receiver play right now is at an inexcusable level. And it goes back to what I said at the beginning of the season. I think you and I talked about on this podcast. Everybody said, oh, look, Iowa's 7 to 8 men deep at wide receiver. That's great. But is it great if the top 3 are not separating themselves from the pack? Because then how many wide receivers do you really have? Iowa has to let it fly against UMass. I'm talking 35 passes. Screw running the football. If you're worried about timing, if you're worried about chemistry, if you're worried about getting into your right routes, run it against UMass. They're giving up 300 passing yards a game. Let it rip time and time and time again. And I might even go so far as to say, Trent, they got to put that slow mesh offense into more consideration for what they want to do. I think it makes the most sense with Gronowski's skill set. So if you want one bright side, I think Iowa's offensive line outside that last drive, I think Iowa's offensive line's been pretty good this season.
My one concern, as I went back and rewatched it Sunday night, and I brought this up earlier in the week to our everydayers with us every day, is that ball placement was still par from Gronowski. You're right. The interception, you can't put all the blame certainly on him on that one, and maybe very little of it. The game plan I thought was awful. His wide receivers didn't help him out, and the drops and everything else. You lose your starting tight end on the 6th play of the game. I mean, that's going to be impactful too. But my concern, and it's the same thing we saw in week 1 against Albany, was ball placement. I counted 5 different passes that the receiver had to adjust to, had to go down for, had to do things like that. And because of that, that's where my concern lies. When you're not making the makeables and giving your receivers that have their own set of issues an opportunity to actually make a play, coupled with the offense and the scheme and the stop routes, and there's not a whole lot of movement in these guys in the routes, that hurts you even more. So that was one thing that jumped out to me. Even on a multitude of his completions, they just weren't in the right spot to allow his receiver to try to do something.
It's not a great combination when some of his best passes were drops.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, I think of the one to Zach Ortworth. Like, you can't place that any better. You can't softball it up any easier than that. So again, what do you need? You need in-game reps. I think the early season game plans have been subpar. I really don't want to get too much into Albany because you knew they weren't going to do anything against Albany, right? They weren't going to showcase anything. This is a big week for Lester to an extent, but the Rutgers game, I think, is going to prove so critical about how this season could potentially play out. And of course, if Iowa beats Rutgers, and we look at Indiana as saying, okay, if they go 4-1 going into the bye, the season's still alive, right? I think we can all agree that, even though if the all passing offense isn't there. Remember what happened after week 2 last year? That was so significant, and it did help change the dynamic of, now again, albeit a really bad Iowa offense, passing offense, run offense. We know what Caleb Johnson, we know what the offensive line did. Do you remember what they did last year after week 2? That was so significant that did help Iowa through the rest of the year.
Gave the ball to Caleb Johnson all the time?
Well, I mean, that's also a big plus. The red zone package with Brendan Sullivan in there. And that was a game changer, and Iowa was so much more efficient when they got there. So now I'm looking at this week, and especially against Rutgers. What is the big change that's going to come now? And I've said this too. If they go out and throw the ball downfield multiple times, if one or two of them get picked, you know what, Trent? Who cares? You know why? That's just as good as a punt. Outside of it being on the stat sheet, right? If you throw the ball 45 yards downfield, it gets picked off the 15. Okay. You still have a defense that can go out there and potentially stop them. But I also think right now, and I'm not going to blame this on Gronowski. So maybe a little bit. I know some people might more. I don't know if he has a receiver he trusts right now to throw the ball downfield to go up and get a 50-50 ball. I think the one player he did was the one who got hurt going up the stairs to go get food in the food line, I think is what KF said, isn't Reese Vanderzee. You know what that tells me also? What I would love to see? Throwing Dayton Howard.
Yes.
Throw the ball Dayton Howard downfield. I know he's not as consistent as you'd like to be, but if you stand next to him and you just look at his physical frame, does that not scream NFL wide receiver to you? I'm not saying he's an NFL guy. I'm not – from a physicality standpoint and an upside standpoint, he's 6'5". He's fast. I think his route running and I think his off the line of scrimmage speed needs a lot of improvement. And that was my big thing in the fall practice that we saw. But Trent, he looked great in the fall practice. He had that one drive with Hank Brown where he had 3 straight catches on 3 straight plays. Throw him in there. Throwing KJ Parker. We hear about how many outstanding plays he has in the scout team. Find out who your guys are at wide receiver. The biggest thing I've seen outside of the ball placement, when you mentioned Gronowski, by the way, that's what Rocco Becht excels in. I know people don't want to hear that. Rocco Becht's one of the best in the country in terms of where to place the football.
Yes.
Right. The other thing outside of the ball placement for Gronowski, I think he's escaping the pocket too soon at times, and then he lets it break down so much, then he doesn't escape. I think his awareness there isn't great. I think he's getting through his reads too quickly. Because if you watch the film, watch Sam Phillips specifically. I don't blame him for being a little bit frustrated because if there's one guy who is actually getting separation, Trent, it's Sam Phillips. He has to look at the other side of the field. He has 2 or 3 guys on the right side. He doesn't look over to the left side where Sam Phillips is. If it's not there, he has to look over there. But the other thing that really frustrated me about the game plan, and this is on Gronowski, where were the checkdowns to the running backs?
Yeah, absolutely.
When those reads downfield weren't there. Like, why wasn't that part of a game plan? Iowa State sniffed that out, and that's why they did what they did, especially on that last drive against them. It was just a rough look, and I think there should be a little bit of pressure on Tim Lester to excel in these next 3 weeks as far as the play calling and game planning goes going into the bye week, because you have to think Iowa did not deserve to win that game, but they were this close to winning that game. They really were.
And the double tip with off of Gray's fingers, off of Townsend into the hands of Burkle. That ball just gets knocked down. It's 4th down. Iowa State's punting with 6 minutes left, and we might be having a completely different conversation today.
Did you know the game was over when Burkle caught that?
Yeah, felt that way.
Okay.
Yeah.
I said the same thing. I was texting a couple people. I was talking to a couple people. I said the game's over. And especially Joel Klatt said best, and I know people didn't want to hear it. I wrote in my column, what happened when Iowa got the ball at the minute 52 left? He said, Iowa is not comfortable in this position. They can't do this. They had a timeout still, and all they need was a field goal, and you're already chalked with the loss. Like, that's why you could hear all the fans in Iowa State cracking Busch Light cans to cope with the fact that they were not going to be able to drive down the field using the pass game to be able to even set up for, a 60-yarder for Drew Stevens he probably has a shot at. I think the wind was with his back, too.
It was.
Could have had a 65-yarder, and they still would have had at least a realistic shot.
And you couldn't feel confident about it. Well, that's a lot of the negatives. There are some positives to take away, and there's a lot of season in front of us, David. We still got 10 games left of this year. We'll get into that as we continue. David Eickholt joining us today on the Locked On Hawkeyes podcast. It's almost the weekend. Time to look back and crown this week's MVP on Who Delivered, powered by DoorDash. Just like you can win every Saturday with DoorDash Streaks, saving more every time you order, these players delivered when it mattered most. Let's break it down. For the Hawkeyes this week, Jazion Patterson delivered in a big way. Power running, he was the kind of guy that they needed in that game. And when the pressure was on, Jazion came through. No hesitation, no delay. And if you've been watching week after week, we know this performance wasn't a fluke. Jazzian Patterson is on a streak. And just like Jazz delivered for the Hawkeyes, DoorDash delivers your Saturdays. With DoorDash Streaks, you save every Saturday you order. Stack it up all season long, and you could save up to $250, including $100 in DoorDash credits. Order this Saturday. Keep the streak alive. Fuel your game day only with DoorDash. Terms apply. Promo period through November 18th. Today's episode is also brought to you by Mazda. Mazda crafts cars for those who do more than simply move. Mazda delivers confidence with every ride, with more IIHS Top Safety Pick Plus awards than anyone else as of August 2025. You can make everyday drive feel anything but, from smooth handling to great control. All-wheel drive standard in every crossover SUV with Mazda. You can drive with confidence through almost any season. Like our players, we set every detail, because when you make every move count, impossible becomes irrelevant. Mazda, move and be moved. Back with you once again, joined by David Eickholt. This is Locked On Hawkeyes. I'm Trent Condon. Thanks for being with us and making Locked On Hawkeyes your first listen every day. David, let's jump to the positives. You talked about Rocco Beck, a tremendous quarterback. Iowa, for the most part, held him in check. I thought they did a good job. The run game for Iowa State that has questions, they bottled that up. The special teams weren't very good, but we still got 10 more of these games to go. And there's a lot of seasons still in front of us. As frustrating as this is, there are some arguments you can make that Iowa can pull themselves up. And maybe the biggest one is a guy that's going for the record for Big Ten wins on Saturday night, and that is Kirk Ferentz. Because you've been covering this team for a long time. I've been covering this team for a long time. It feels like when Iowa football, when their backs are against their wall under Kirk Ferentz, that's the time that sometimes they're the best.
You're right. And it'll be interesting to see how long they feel like their backs are against the wall, though, right? Because UMass win does nothing. They could go out there and win by 50. Like, in terms of like what we're going to talk about, right? What people are going to talk about. Beat Rutgers. Iowa should be favored anyway. They've had no problem with Rutgers. Rutgers has never beaten Iowa in football. If they go in there and they beat Indiana at home, if they keep Fernando Mendoza in check, go 4-1 into the bye week, then I think you're thinking, okay, Iowa still has a shot at doing something this season. And it was not all negative. I know we keep harping on the passing offense because we have to, based on what the expectations were so far. They've failed to deliver. How about TJ Hall? Like, that is a guy that has taken a significant step forward that I had questions about. I think everybody who is a fan of Iowa had questions about, people in the media. But they've repeatedly said, hey, TJ Hall's the guy that's taking his game to another level. They think he can be that number one guy. 3 pass breakups on Saturday. He just sounds more confident. He moves more confident. Yeah. I'm still a little bit worried about Deshaun Lee. Still worried about Jane Harrell. Carson Shire, I think, is playing some good football right now. I think Jackson Rexroth is actually playing some good football as well. Cohen Entringer is this close to making a big, big play happen, because go back to that Burkle catch. He did exactly what he was supposed to do. Like, Burkle made a great catch. Cohen was right there, had a great hit on him. I think his hand hit the football too, but Burkle just held on to it, right? But that's exactly how you teach those guys to react in that situation. So I think defensively, you're kind of thinking, okay, do they have potential to be a Phil Parker defense? I'm not going to go quite that far, but they are certainly way more ahead than I thought they were going to be at this point in the year. I think Iowa's defensive line, for the most part, has been good. I think they did put pressure on Rocco Beck. I'm not really going to look too far into the sack numbers, because Rocco got rid of that football so quick. Almost every single play, right? It's almost impossible for Iowa to get home when he's only holding on the ball for about 2 seconds. So I think if you want some positives, I think those are a couple of good places to start. TJ Hall is my MVP of the game from last week, just on the defense, what he was able to do. And another positive, which it's kind of weird that I'm framing it like this, there's no shot that Iowa special teams is as bad as it was last week against Iowa State. That's just not going to happen again. And I'm looking at Caden Weechin to have maybe even house a punt against UMass, because I'll tell you what, there's probably fewer people that feel worse about what happened on Saturday than him, because that was, I think, by far his worst game as an Iowa Hawkeye football player.
You know, he talked on Tuesday a little bit about the shoes, not wearing the right cleats there. I mean, boy, that just, I know certain.
I was stunned he said it. I was stunned he told us.
Yeah.
It's crazy. Well, it's even crazier when you think about the fact that he said, yeah, in high school, I always played on a grass field, but I haven't done it in a while. I'm like, I think we were all kind of looking at each other like, did he really just admit he wasn't wearing? Now, look, maybe he still slips. I don't know. But like, that is like the very basic precautions and stuff that you need to have as a returner. But the other side of it too is, I think it was just a domino effect for him, because I think Caden Weechen's he's a competitor, but he's not exactly a fiery guy from everything that I know about him and I've heard about him. He had the personal foul on the opening kickoff for no reason. I mean, his game just started off and it just sort of tailed down. So again, if you want to take a positive, Iowa special teams is not going to play worse, and the defense looks better than I think what most of us anticipated.
Schedule's difficult. You got the short week next week with Rutgers coming up. After that, of course, Indiana, who we'll see, haven't played anybody. They still won't this week, though they'll get Illinois the week before. The behemoths against Oregon, against Penn State, still to come. Rivalry games, Wisconsin on the road, Nebraska on the road, home game against Minnesota. The schedule's incredibly difficult. If you had to say right now, how do you think this thing is going to play out? Are we going to pull themselves up and get to 7-8 wins, or do you have major concerns with this squad?
I mean, I got major concerns. I mean, we were talking about the Swarmcast with Elliot and I yesterday. I have two different panic meters. Remember my panic meter for Mark? Yeah. That's up to about 4 now. Because again, I still don't think he's the biggest problem. I think he's the biggest playmaker they have on offense right now, especially with the guys out. Passing game, I'm about an 8.5. Like, I have some major concerns about. But the other side of it too is, and then I'll get to my other point. I also think Tim Lester needs more elite wide receivers to open up his playbook. I think there's a big portion of his playbook that he's not even trying to implement because he does not believe that the guys have the upside to be able to run what he wants to truly run. It makes sense to me just when you kind of take a look at how he's run his offenses in the past. So I think that's worth noting. Right now, I'm leaning more towards 7-5. I can't quite get to 6-6 yet because I still think they beat Wisconsin. Like, I don't think they're going to have a difficult time with Wisconsin. I really don't. As crazy as that sounds, right? They're going to beat UMass. They're going to beat Rutgers, and that's 5 already. And if there's one game I said before the season that, like, hey, it's a 50-50 game, but I guarantee a certain result, they're not losing to Minnesota. I guess, again, prediction. I'd be shocked if they lost to Minnesota at Kinnick after what happened last time that was at Kinnick. We all know what happened last time at Kinnick. And Kirk is not exactly a fan of PJ Fleck. I don't think that's any secret. I mean, right then you're already looking at, 5 or 6 wins. And okay, if Iowa can go beat Nebraska, and I still think that's going to be a toss-up game in its own right. I'm more 7-5 right now. If they go 4-1 and they beat Indiana going into the bye week, I still think they can pull off 9 games. But they also have to get the monkey off their back, which is being any sort of competitive against a ranked team. The statistics are mind-boggling, and it's quite frankly inexcusable. Kirk Ferentz would tell you the same exact thing.
Last minute with you, David. You run the message board over at HawkeyeInsider.com. What's it like after a loss like that? I mean, I pop on to the board, so I know, and very quickly I'm able to walk away. That's part of your job, and it's not the case for you. What is it like when you got, just the craziness that happens on message boards?
They pay my salary. I'm happy I have so many passionate subscribers.
Yep.
I think it's an interesting thing because you have like the very loyal KF can do no wrong guys, and you have the very radical fire KF needs to retire. Oh, the sky is falling. There's very little middle ground.
Right.
But again, it's not specifically to my message board. Trent, you've been on message boards probably longer than I have, right? This is the way it's always been. It's the way it's always going to be. If Iowa goes out there, goes 4-1, or if they pull off a win against Penn State or Oregon somehow, right? Or if they go beat at USC, what's everybody going to be saying? See, look, that's why you stick it out. That's why there's 12 games in a year. Kirk Ferentz is going to pull those boys back. Ultimately, everybody's just passionate. It's like everything else in life. But, man, I got to moderate. And it just takes so much energy to, know what to delete, who to ban. Can I ban them? Can I just stop, all the rage bait that goes on there, all this. But It's part of the shtick. Their passion pays our salaries, Trent. So I'm not going to complain.
Absolutely. Love their passion as well, and love having you on. David Eickholt, 24/7 Sports, HawkeyeInsider.com. David, as always, thank you for your time. And if people want to get involved with you and become part of the craziness on the message boards, where they can go.
Yeah, so either look at my Twitter. I still refuse to call it X. I'm not doing it, Trent. At David Eickholt. And then HawkeyeInsider.com, 30% off right now. Obviously, Elliot Clough, Sean Bach, and I are all hands on deck with everything going on. So, just stop on by, shoot me a tweet, get involved. It's only September right now, Trent. Yeah. We got a long way to go.
We got basketball right in front of us. Thank you, David. We'll talk to you again soon.
Thanks, man. Appreciate it.
David Eickholt joining us from 24/7 Sports. A big thank you to him, as always, for all of his time. HawkeyeInsider.com, once again, is the website. Wrapping things up, let's take a look forward to this weekend. And it's not just Hawkeyes, UMass. No, there's a whole lot more going on. I got a pick for the game, and I got a reason for it. What are the Hawkeyes going to do against the spread this week? We'll do that as we continue Locked On Hawkeyes. The NFL season is here, and FanDuel is making sure you're ready for kickoff with a can't-miss offer. Right now, new customers can bet just $5. If your bet wins, you'll get $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. Yes, you can jump aboard with all the NFL action. College football is covered. Maybe it is a little bit of baseball for you as we come down to the final 20 games or so of the season. You can jump in as well with live betting action. Absolutely love that. You think you got a game figured out? You can bet on it on the FanDuel app. It's quick, easy, and the best way to add a little more energy to Sundays. Are you ready to play? Download the FanDuel app now by visiting FanDuel.com to get started. That's FanDuel.com to place your first $5 bet. FanDuel.com. Trent Condon wrapping things up with you here on the Locked On Hawkeyes podcast. A big thank you to everydayers with us each and every day. We are your daily source for Iowa Hawkeye content each and every day here on the podcast form. And thanks again, once again, to David Eickholt for joining us here on today's program. All right, let's continue here on our Locked On Hawkeyes program with a look at the weekend ahead. So on my radio show, you hear me at the top of every show mentioning that I have my radio show every weekday on the Iowa Sports Radio Network and locally on KXNO in Des Moines. And one thing we do every week, it is a contest where we have callers call in and we give them an opportunity to win chicken wings from the Chicken Coop, a restaurant here in town. But one thing we've learned throughout the years is when everybody picks one side, you want to go the other, because over 70% of the time that other side hits. Everybody this week grabbed UMass in the points. So that is the reason that I am going to be fading, at least the listeners of my radio show, and I'm going to play the Hawkeyes this week. How are they going to do it? The passing game, yes, has to be a part. There's no doubt about it. But another component, and we'll talk about this a little bit tomorrow on the preview episode when we break things down even deeper with UMass. I get it. And if you want to say, Trent, you said this before 2 weeks ago, before Albany, that is completely fair. Albany was bad. Albany had huge question marks and hung around for a while. This UMass team is awful. Just absolutely a dreadful football team. On top of it, they're dealing with injuries. There is just so much here. Yes, it's not like it was back in 2002 where Iowa can go out there and just steamroll opponents, but I think a steamroll is coming. On top of it, there's been a lot of talk this week about we've talked so much about the offense, about the defense, and as good as they were on Saturday, and as good as they were for most of the first two games of the season, outside of a couple of drives against Albany, here's the other component. They have not been getting the quarterback. They have not been forcing turnovers. For the first time in a long time, since 2014, this from Chad Leistico of the Des Moines Register, Iowa has gone 4 games without an interception. I think that changes on Saturday. I think that changes in a big-time way. I think they're going to get multiple interceptions. I think there's going to be a defensive score in there. David Eickholt mentioned maybe a special team score from Caden Weechin. I think there are a lot of components that you point to away from just the offense that Iowa's going to roll. So we're going to lay the points this week. Give me the Hawkeyes laying gulp 5 touchdowns. A little bit more from the weekend coming up here. A lot of intriguing games. Now, the Big Ten slate is not good. New Mexico, UCLA, woof. Indiana's hosting Indiana State. Maryland's got Townsend. The Big Ten game this week is Oregon Northwestern. That's where big noon kickoff's going to be there. I think they're letting that grass grow a little bit high on the stadium in Northwestern as they're getting Ryan Field ready for next year to open up. Nebraska hosts Houston Christian, Michigan Central Michigan. The other one that has two that have a little intrigue. Wisconsin go to Alabama. Alabama's got their own set of issues, and I think they might be able just to flex their muscle here and maybe get some of the natives a little less restless down in Tuscaloosa. But late night, I can't wait after things wrap up with Iowa and UMass to flip on Minnesota going on the road to Cal. Cal's got a quarterback that really impressed me back in week number 1. I watched a lot of their game in their victory against Oregon State. Now, I was also on the Beaver side, so that was the reason I was watching. But they've had this young quarterback from Hawaii, Jaren Kave Suputele, and he's dynamic. He's really, really fun to watch. And Minnesota team that's banged up. Darius Taylor's a little bit banged up. There's been some injury concerns coupled with what we know normally, Big Ten teams going west. It doesn't go very well. I think Cal's a live dog on Saturday night, and that is my best bet of the week. The Golden Bears getting 2.5 on the FanDuel Sportsbook app. Out of time for today. We will be back with you. The ultimate preview for Iowa UMass will be joined as well by Tom Kakert from HawkeyeReport.com. That's coming your way on tomorrow's show. Thanks for being with us and making Locked On Hawkeyes your first listen every day. And college football fans, Locked On and Fire TV present College Football Kickoff. You can find it right now. It's your ultimate college football weekly preview. Drake Toll from Locked On Big 12, along with two-time Associated Press Coach of the Year Gary Patterson, former college star Jesse Holley, and Locked On local experts. It's a college football preview only Locked On can do. Catch College Football Kickoff every Thursday throughout the season only on Fire TV. We'll be back with you tomorrow. Thanks for joining us as always. Hit that subscribe button if you're watching us on YouTube. We'll talk to you again tomorrow. Until then, go Hawks.